I'm Jessica, 27 years old, and until recently, my family was everything to me. We were close, or so I thought. Then everything changed when they collectively decided I was the source of all their problems. "You ruined our lives, get out." Those words still echo in my mind. So I left without a fight and cut contact completely. What I never expected were the 50-plus missed calls exactly 1 month later. Before I share what happened, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how everything unfolded. Growing up, I believed I had the perfect family. My parents, Amanda and Robert, created what seemed like a warm, loving home. My younger sister Stephanie was always the artistic one, while my older brother Michael was the charismatic athlete everyone adored. Me? I was the responsible middle child, the planner, the one who made things happen. By 27, I'd built a successful career as a marketing executive at a growing tech company. Through hard work and countless late nights, I'd climbed from entry-level coordinator to senior manager in just 5 years. My colleagues respected me, and my boss often praised my dedication. This success allowed me to help my family financially, something I was happy to do. Our Sunday dinners were sacred. Every week without fail, I'd drive to my parents' suburban home, bringing dessert and often groceries for the week. Holidays were even more special. I'd take charge of planning, coordinating everyone's schedules, and usually covering most expenses. Christmas meant elaborate decorations and thoughtfully chosen gifts for everyone. Birthdays never went uncelebrated, and family vacations happened because I researched options within our budget. When my parents struggled with their mortgage after Dad's brief unemployment, I paid 3 months of payments to keep them afloat. When Stephanie started college, I bought all her textbooks each semester, knowing how expensive education had become. And when Michael's car needed major repairs, I loaned him $2,000, which remained unpaid despite his promises. My own dreams took a backseat to family needs. I'd been saving for a down payment on a modest house, but progress was slow with so many family financial emergencies. Still, I was optimistic. I'd recently started dating David, a kind software engineer who understood my family commitments. He'd joined our Sunday dinners, bringing wine and engaging my father in conversations about vintage cars. My mother seemed to approve, and even my siblings warmed to him eventually. Family comes first, my mother had always taught us. I embraced this philosophy completely, often canceling personal plans when family needed me. When Stephanie had her wisdom teeth removed, I took 2 days off work to care for her. When Michael needed a ride at 2 a.m. from a bar because he'd had too much to drink, I drove 20 miles without complaint. When Mom needed company for doctor's appointments, I rearranged my work schedule to accommodate. There were signs I was being taken for granted, but I dismissed them. Like when Stephanie called my birthday gift practical but boring, or when Michael joked that my job wasn't really that demanding after I mentioned being tired from a big project. My parents sometimes referred to my apartment as temporary, despite it being my home for 3 years, as though my independent life wasn't quite real until I had a family of my own. Then came the promotion I'd worked toward for 2 years. Senior marketing director with a significant salary increase, more responsibility, and a team to manage. I was ecstatic, but also aware that my workload would temporarily increase as I adjusted to the new role. I explained this to my family, asking for understanding if I missed occasional Sunday dinners during the transition period. "So we're not a priority anymore?" Stephanie had asked, her tone light but with an edge that surprised me. "Your career seems to be all that matters now," Michael added, though his own job changes had received nothing but support from me. My parents said they understood, but I noticed the frequency of their calls increased. Emergency situations that required my immediate attention or financial assistance seemed to multiply. When I couldn't drop everything for a minor household repair or last-minute babysitting for Michael's kids, I sensed their disappointment hardening into something else. The subtle shift was happening, but I was too busy balancing work and family obligations to fully recognize it. David noticed, though. They expect a lot from you, he observed carefully one evening after a particularly tense family dinner. More than they expect from themselves or each other. I defended them, explaining our family dynamics and how we'd always supported each other. But his words lingered in my mind, creating the first tiny fracture in my unwavering family loyalty. Still, I pushed forward, determined to maintain both my career success and family harmony. I believed I could have both. I believed my family would eventually adjust to my growing responsibilities and be proud of my achievements. I believed their love was unconditional, just as mine was for them. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first real crack in our family. I can make both work, I assured everyone, planning to attend the critical first hour of the meeting before driving directly to the restaurant. I'd already arranged for flowers to be delivered and had prepaid for everyone's meals as my gift. The meeting ran 15 minutes longer than expected. I texted my mother that I was on my way, but hit unexpected traffic. By the time I arrived at the upscale Italian restaurant, I was 40 minutes late. My family sat at a round table, cocktails half finished, expressions cool as I rushed in, apologizing profusely. "Nice of you to join us," Michael said, checking his watch pointedly. "We were about to order without you." "I'm so sorry," I said, slightly breathless as I took the empty seat between David and Stephanie. The meeting went long, and then traffic was terrible on the highway. "Your important meeting," Stephanie murmured, stirring her martini. "Must be nice to have such an important job that family celebrations become optional." "That's not fair," I protested. My father shrugged, his usual warm smile absent. "We understand. Your career comes first these days." "It doesn't," I insisted, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I've been working so hard to balance everything." "Balance?" My mother's eyebrows rose. "Is that what you call missing half of Sunday dinners last month?" David placed his hand on mine under the table, a small gesture of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed by my siblings, who exchanged knowing glances. "Jessica has been under a lot of pressure," David said carefully. "She's been working 60-hour weeks, but still makes every effort to be present for family events." "Oh, the boyfriend's defending her now," Michael said with a snort. "You've known her, 6 months? We've known her our whole lives. She's changed." The conversation deteriorated from there. When I mentioned the house I hoped to buy by year's end, Michael immediately brought up the loan I'd given him. "Speaking of money, I'll get you that $2,000 once my commission comes through next month," he said, though he'd made similar promises for over a year. "I wasn't asking about it," I said quietly, embarrassed that he'd brought it up in front of everyone. "But you're thinking about it, aren't you?" "Always keeping score," Stephanie added, though I'd never once mentioned the textbooks or other expenses I'd covered for her. My parents watched this exchange with strange satisfaction, as though my siblings were articulating thoughts they themselves had harbored. The anniversary dinner I'd planned as a celebration became an inquisition. Every choice I'd made recently was scrutinized and found wanting. My promotion wasn't an achievement, but a symptom of misplaced priorities. David wasn't a positive addition to my life, but a distraction from family obligations. We left early. The fancy dessert I'd pre-ordered for my parents canceled. In the car, David was uncharacteristically quiet until we were halfway back to my apartment. "That was unfair," he finally said. "The way they treated you tonight." "They're just adjusting to my new schedule," I said automatically, though uncertainty crept into my voice. "They don't mean anything by it." "Jessica," David said gently, "they made you feel guilty for being 40 minutes late to a dinner you arranged and paid for, while working a job that helps support them. That's not normal." "You don't understand our family dynamics," I said defensively, though his words resonated more than I wanted to admit. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the dinner conversation, searching for what I could have said or done differently. The look of disappointment in my mother's eyes haunted me. The casual cruelty in my siblings' remarks stung in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time, I wondered if David might be right. Was it possible that my family's expectations were unreasonable? Was I being taken advantage of rather than being a dutiful daughter and sister? I pushed these thoughts away by morning, chalking it up to a bad night and temporary stress for everyone. I sent my parents a text apologizing again for being late, with a gift card to their favorite restaurant for a private dinner. The response was a simple thank you, without the usual heart emoji my mother added to every message. Something had shifted, and I sensed the ground beneath our family foundation beginning to crumble. Over the next few weeks, every interaction with my family felt like navigating a minefield. Text messages went unanswered for days. Phone calls became brief and formal. Sunday dinners, when I could attend, were filled with pointed remarks about my absence the previous week. Then my grandmother Helen fell ill. Mom's mother had always been the family matriarch, a strong-willed woman who'd raised 6 children, largely on her own, after my grandfather's early death. At 83, she'd been remarkably independent until a series of small strokes left her needing specialized care. My mother called on a Tuesday morning, catching me just before an important client meeting. Grandma Helen needs to move to a specialized care facility, she explained without preamble. The family needs to contribute. Your share would be $8,000. The amount shocked me. $8,000? Mom, that's a huge amount to come up with suddenly. I've been saving for my down payment. So your house is more important than your grandmother's care? Her voice turned frigid. That's not what I said, I replied, trying to stay calm. I can contribute $3,000 right now. That's what I can afford without completely derailing my financial security. Financial security, she repeated as if the concept was offensive. The rest of us are pulling together despite our struggles. Michael is taking out a loan. Mom, I've been helping everyone financially for years, I reminded her gently. I want to help Grandma too, but I need to be realistic about what I can afford. We all knew success would change you, she said before hanging up. Later that day, Michael called, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Mom's really... I know, and I feel terrible. I'm contributing what I can afford right now, I explained. Look, I need to tell you something, he said, his voice dropping. I'm in some trouble. Gambling debts. About $15,000. The revelation stunned me. Michael, when did this happen? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I tried, but you've been so busy with your fancy job and new boyfriend. You're never around anymore. If you had been, maybe I wouldn't have gotten in so deep. That's not fair, I protested. You can't blame your gambling addiction on me not being available 24/7. See? This is why I couldn't talk to you. You're judging me instead of helping. The old Jessica would have understood. The conversation ended badly, with Michael implying that my success had made me cold and uncaring. I sat at my desk afterward, hands shaking, wondering how my brother's gambling problem had somehow become my fault. That weekend, Stephanie called with her own bombshell. I'm dropping out of college, she announced. There's no point in continuing. What? You're only 1 year from graduating. What happened? Not everyone can be perfect like you, Jessica, she said bitterly. You set these impossible standards with your perfect grades and perfect job. It's suffocating. I was speechless. I'd never pressured Stephanie about her grades or career path. I'd supported her changing majors twice and taking a semester off to find herself in Europe, a trip I'd partially funded. Stephanie, I've only ever wanted you to be happy. I've never expected you to follow my path. That's such a lie, she said with unexpected venom. Everything's a competition with you. Now you have this perfect boyfriend and you're buying a house, and everyone has to hear about Jessica's amazing life while the rest of us struggle. I ended the call feeling like I'd entered an alternate reality where I was someone completely different from who I knew myself to be. The situation deteriorated further when I discovered my extended family had been hearing a very different version of events. My cousin Allison called to ask if I was doing okay after the breakdown. Breakdown? What are you talking about? Your mom mentioned you've been having emotional problems since your promotion. That you've been lashing out at family and becoming erratic. We've all been worried. Horrified, I realized my parents had been systematically turning relatives against me, creating a narrative where my mental health was questionable and my behavior problematic. David experienced the family's changing attitude firsthand when he attended a family gathering without me while I was on a business trip. He called afterward, concern evident in his voice. Your brother took me aside to talk man to man about your fragile state and how I should be encouraging you to seek help and spend more time with family instead of focusing on career advancement. What did you say? I asked, stunned. I told him I didn't recognize the person he was describing. That you're the most balanced, hardworking, generous person I know. And he said I was part of the problem and that the family was worried about your relationship with me. I suggested family counseling to my parents, researching therapists who specialized in family dynamics and offering to pay for sessions. Their response was dismissive. We don't need a stranger telling us how to be a family, my father said. We need our daughter back. The constant stress began affecting my work. I missed deadlines, something that had never happened before. I found myself unable to concentrate in meetings, my mind replaying family conversations instead of focusing on client needs. My boss, Natalie, noticed the change. After a particularly scattered presentation, she invited me into her office. Jessica, you're one of our strongest team members, but something's clearly wrong. Is there anything I can help with? Her genuine concern broke through my professional facade. I found myself explaining the family situation in halting terms, embarrassed to be bringing personal problems into the workplace. To my surprise, Natalie shared her own experience with family estrangement. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is create distance, she advised. Your work family supports you, whatever you decide. Her understanding contrasted sharply with my actual family's behavior. I made one last attempt at reconciliation, spending a Saturday selecting thoughtful gifts for everyone, books that matched my father's interests, art supplies for Stephanie, memorabilia from Michael's favorite sports team, and a spa certificate for my mother. I brought them to Sunday dinner, hoping to reset our relationships. The gifts were received with brief thanks but quickly set aside. Within minutes, the conversation returned to familiar themes: my absence, my changed priorities, my failure to support the family adequately. I drove home that night with the distinct feeling that nothing I could do would ever be enough again. Grandmother Helen's condition worsened suddenly the following week. My mother's text was brief: Helen in hospital. Critical. I immediately requested emergency time off, which Natalie approved despite an upcoming client presentation I'd been preparing for weeks. I drove 3 hours to the hospital, my mind racing with worry about my grandmother and anxiety about facing my family. When I arrived at the intensive care unit, my family was already gathered in the waiting room. No one stood to greet me. My mother acknowledged my presence with a tight nod. How is she? I asked, setting down my overnight bag. Critical, my father answered curtly. The doctor says these next 24 hours are crucial. I noticed Stephanie had been crying, her eyes red-rimmed. Michael paced near the window, his expression grim. Despite the tension between us, my heart ached for them, for all of us facing the potential loss of our beloved grandmother. I came as soon as I got the message, I said, hoping they recognized I'd dropped everything to be there. We've been here since morning, my mother replied, the implication clear. I was late again. I sat quietly, accepting the unspoken criticism. This wasn't the time to defend myself. As the hours passed, family members took turns visiting Grandmother Helen's room. When my turn came, I sat beside her bed, holding her frail hand, telling her how much I loved her, though she remained unconscious. While getting coffee from the hospital cafeteria, I ran into my Aunt Teresa, my mother's sister. Jessica, I've been meaning to talk to you, she said, her expression uncomfortable. I'm worried about some charges on your credit card. My credit card? What are you talking about? Your mother said you approved her using your card for some of Helen's expenses and family meals during this difficult time. But the charges seem quite high. Shocked, I checked my banking app immediately. There were thousands of dollars in recent charges I hadn't made, restaurants I'd never visited, clothing stores, even a hotel stay. I returned to the waiting room, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. My family was huddled together, speaking in low voices that stopped abruptly when I approached. Did someone use my credit card without permission? I asked directly, my voice wavering. My mother's face flushed. We've all been making sacrifices for Helen. Since you refused to contribute properly, we found another way. You stole from me, I said, the reality of their betrayal sinking in. That's illegal. I never gave anyone permission to use my card. Oh, here we go, Michael said loudly, standing up. Jessica's going to threaten her own family with legal action while our grandmother is dying. Real classy. I didn't threaten anything, I protested. I'm just shocked that my own family would. Would what? My father interrupted, his voice rising. Would expect you to help? Would count on you in a crisis? This is what families do, Jessica. They show up for each other without counting the cost. I have shown up. I've been showing up for years. I've supported all of you financially and emotionally while trying to build my own life. Your own selfish life, Stephanie interjected. With your perfect boyfriend and perfect job, looking down on the rest of us. The argument escalated quickly, years of unspoken resentment pouring out. Hospital staff glanced our way nervously as voices rose. You've changed since that promotion, my mother said. Success has made you forget where you came from. I work 60-hour weeks to afford helping all of you. I was nearly shouting now, my composure cracking. I've delayed my own goals repeatedly to support this family. Then my father stood, his face contorted with anger I'd never seen before. You ruined our lives, get out, he yelled, pointing toward the exit. We were better off before you became successful and looked down on us. Stunned silence followed his outburst. Patients and visitors stared. A nurse approached, asking if everything was all right. Michael broke the silence with a bitter laugh. You should know, Jessica, I told my creditors they could come to you for the gambling debts. Since you're so concerned about your precious money, you might want to handle that. Stephanie added her own revelation. And I deliberately told David about your ex-boyfriends and made up stories about your emotional problems. I wanted him to see the real you. The systematic betrayal left me speechless. These people who shared my blood had been actively working to undermine my relationship, my finances, and my reputation. David, who had stepped away to take a work call, returned to find me hyperventilating, unable to process what was happening. He guided me to a chair, shooting concerned glances at my family, who watched with cold detachment. I think Jessica needs some air, he said firmly, helping me to my feet. No one moved to stop us as he led me out of the waiting room. In his car, the panic attack overtook me completely. Between gasping breaths, I explained what had happened. David held me while I sobbed, his steady presence the only thing keeping me anchored as my family foundation crumbled completely. We checked into a nearby hotel, neither of us willing to return to that toxic waiting room. I called the hospital directly for updates on grandmother Helen, and a kind nurse promised to keep me informed. At 3:17 a.m., the call came. Grandmother Helen had passed peacefully. I wept in David's arms, grieving not only my grandmother, but the family I thought I had. It wasn't until morning that I received any communication from my family. A text from my mother, Helen is gone. If you had really cared, you might have been here. The funeral is Saturday. The cruelty of the message broke something inside me. I collapsed back onto the hotel bed, physically ill with grief and shock. David stayed with me, canceling his own work commitments, bringing me tea I couldn't drink and food I couldn't eat. As morning light filled the room, A strange clarity came over me. This pattern of emotional manipulation and abuse had been happening for years, but I'd been too enmeshed to recognize it. David had seen it immediately, as had my boss Natalie, while I'd made excuses and blamed myself. Later that day, David finally shared what he'd been holding back. "Your family approached me separately multiple times, telling me you were unstable, that you'd fabricated achievements, that you had severe, untreated anxiety that made you paranoid about them. They tried to convince me to break up with you for my own good." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, horrified. I planned to, but wanted concrete examples first. "I was worried you wouldn't believe me without proof." "They're very convincing, Jessica. They believe their own narrative completely." The full extent of their betrayal crystallized in that moment. My family hadn't just been taking advantage of my generosity, they had been actively sabotaging my happiness. The week following grandmother Helen's death passed in a blur of grief, shock, and painful revelation. I called Natalie and requested additional time off, briefly explaining the family crisis. Her response was immediate and supportive. "Take what you need. Your projects are covered. Focus on your well-being right now." I found a therapist, Dr. Lauren Fisher, who specialized in family trauma. During our first emergency session, she helped me identify the toxic dynamics that had characterized my family relationships for years. "What you're describing sounds like a combination of financial exploitation and emotional abuse," she explained gently. "The fact that they've tried to isolate you from your partner and colleagues by painting you as unstable is particularly concerning." "But they're my family," I protested weakly, still struggling to accept the reality of the situation. "Family should be a source of support and love, not continuous harm," Dr. Fisher said. "Sometimes creating distance is the healthiest choice you can make." Over several intensive sessions, I began to see how my role as the family fixer and financial safety net had become my entire identity in their eyes. My success threatened that dynamic, triggering their resentment and attempts to bring me back under control. "What should I do?" I asked Dr. Fisher during our fourth session. "That's ultimately your decision," she replied. "But whatever you choose should prioritize your mental and emotional well-being. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm." After careful consideration and many conversations with David, I made the difficult decision to create significant distance from my family. The choice wasn't made lightly or in anger, but from a place of self-preservation and newfound clarity. I approached the separation methodically. First, I secured my finances, canceling the compromised credit card, checking my credit report for other unauthorized accounts, and changing all passwords and security questions on my financial accounts. I documented the fraudulent charges for potential future need, but decided against pressing charges immediately. Next, I wrote a letter to my family. It took 7 drafts to find the right tone, honest, but not accusatory, firm but not cruel. I explained how their actions had affected me, acknowledged our shared grief over grandmother Helen, and outlined my decision to step back from our relationship for my own well-being. "I will always love you," I wrote in conclusion, "but I need to love myself enough to create boundaries that protect my mental health. I hope someday we can rebuild our relationship on healthier terms." I drove to my parents' house when I knew they would be at grandmother Helen's funeral reception. I couldn't face attending the service after their treatment at the hospital, a decision that brought its own grief and guilt. Instead, I placed the letter in their mailbox, along with the house key they had given me years ago. The finality of that moment, returning the key to my childhood home, brought unexpected tears. I sat in my car afterward, mourning not just my grandmother but the loss of the family I had believed in for 27 years. That evening, I blocked my family members on social media but deliberately left my phone number unblocked. I wasn't cutting contact completely, I was creating necessary distance while leaving a channel open should they ever want to communicate respectfully. The fallout came quickly. Extended family members began calling and texting, having heard dramatically different versions of events from my parents. Some were accusatory, repeating the narrative that I had abandoned the family during a crisis. Others were confused, sensing inconsistencies in the story they'd been told. To those who reached out with genuine concern, I offered a simple, consistent response. I love my family but needed to create some distance for my well-being. I hope you can respect that this is a private matter. A few relatives surprised me with their understanding. My cousin Julia called to offer support, revealing that she had witnessed my parents' manipulation firsthand at family gatherings but hadn't known how to address it. "I've always admired how much you did for them," she said. "But I worried they were taking advantage of your generous nature." These small connections helped ease the isolation I felt, reminding me that family could still exist in my life through chosen relationships rather than obligatory ones. With Dr. Fisher's guidance, I focused on healing. I established self-care routines that had been impossible during years of meeting everyone else's needs. Simple acts like taking long walks, reading for pleasure, or cooking elaborate meals just for myself became revolutionary acts of self-compassion. David's unwavering support proved invaluable. He never pressured me toward any particular decision, but stood by my choices completely. Our relationship deepened through the crisis, his steady presence a sharp contrast to the conditional love I'd experienced from my family. Work gradually became a sanctuary again. I returned to the office after 2 weeks, finding comfort in the structured environment and clear expectations. Natalie checked in regularly but respected my privacy, creating space for me to rebuild my professional confidence. As weeks passed, I made the difficult decision to relocate. My apartment held too many memories of family visits and late-night emergency calls. I found a bright one-bedroom across town, not hiding my new address, but not sharing it either. Moving day brought unexpected emotions. As David and friends from work helped carry furniture and boxes, I realized I was physically dismantling my old life while building something new. The apartment represented a fresh start, a space untouched by family drama and expectations. The first holiday season apart from my family tested my resolve. Thanksgiving approached with commercial reminders of family togetherness everywhere. Dr. Fisher helped me prepare for the emotional impact and develop alternative plans. "Create new traditions that feel meaningful to you," she suggested. "Acknowledge the grief while also embracing the freedom to celebrate on your own terms." David and I hosted a Friendsgiving with colleagues and neighbors, a casual gathering that bore no resemblance to the tension-filled formal dinners of my family past. The laughter and genuine warmth of that evening showed me what healthy connections could feel like. The healing wasn't linear. Good days followed by unexpected emotional crashes became my new normal. Sometimes guilt overwhelmed me, the lifetime of conditioning to put family first reasserting itself in moments of vulnerability. Other days brought anger as I recognized the years of manipulation I had endured. Through it all, therapy remained my anchor. Dr. Fisher validated my experience while challenging me to develop stronger boundaries and self-advocacy skills. Slowly, I began recognizing my own worth separate from what I could provide for others. Christmas approached with targeted advertisements and holiday music triggering memories of family traditions. Instead of succumbing to sadness, I volunteered at a local shelter, finding unexpected joy in connecting with others without the weight of complicated history. For the first time in my adult life, I entered the new year without the burden of being everyone else's safety net. The freedom felt foreign but increasingly precious as I discovered who Jessica could be when not defined by family obligations and expectations. A full month passed with no contact from my immediate family. The silence was both painful and relieving. I missed the people I thought my family members were, while acknowledging that those idealized versions had never truly existed. During this period of separation, unexpected positive developments emerged in other areas of my life. Natalie called me into her office on a Wednesday afternoon, closing the door for privacy. "Jessica, I've been impressed with your resilience these past months," she began. "Despite personal challenges, your work has actually improved in quality and innovation. She proceeded to offer me another promotion marketing strategy director with a significant salary increase and more creative control. The recognition of my professional growth, completely separate from family validation, felt particularly meaningful. You've earned this through consistent excellence, Natalie emphasized. Take the weekend to consider the offer. That weekend, David suggested a getaway to celebrate. We drove to a charming coastal town 3 hours away, staying in a boutique hotel overlooking the ocean. Walking along the windswept beach, hand in hand with someone who valued me for exactly who I was, I felt a peace that had eluded me for years. "I'm proud of you," David said as we watched the sunset. "Not just for the promotion, but for everything you've navigated these past months. Your strength amazes me." Sunday evening, we returned to my apartment, relaxed and reconnected. As I plugged in my phone, which had remained off during our weekend escape, it immediately began buzzing with notifications. 57 missed calls, 32 voicemails, 49 text messages, all from my family. My heart raced as My father's first voicemail was coldly formal. "Jessica, your mother, and I received your letter. We're disappointed in your dramatic overreaction. Call us when you're ready to apologize." My mother's early messages carried a similar tone. "I raised you better than this. Walking away from family is never acceptable. Call me immediately." Michael's first contribution was predictably hostile. "Way to abandon the family when things got tough. Real mature, Jess." Stephanie initially sent only a series of angry face emojis followed by, "Can't believe you're doing this to mom and dad after everything they've done for you." But as days passed without my response, the tone changed dramatically. My father's later voicemails revealed uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Jessica, please call us. Things aren't good here. We need to talk." My mother's messages became increasingly desperate. "Jessica, I don't understand why you're punishing us like this. We're your family. Please call home." Michael's final voicemail was shocking in its frankness. "Jess, it's all falling apart here. My gambling debts are worse than I admitted. Creditors are coming after mom and dad because they co-signed some loans. I didn't tell them how bad it was. Please call back. I need your help." Stephanie's texts evolved from anger to pleading. "I dropped out of college and I'm living at home again. Parents fight constantly. I know I said awful things, but please call. Everything's worse without you." Additional calls came from extended family members who had previously sided with my parents, but now seemed to be reaching out independently. David sat beside me as I listened to message after message, his hand steady on my back. "Take your time," he said softly. "You don't have to respond tonight." The final voicemail was from my mother, her voice barely recognizable through tears. "Jessica, the bank started foreclosure proceedings on the house. Your father's health is declining from the stress. We didn't realize how much we depended on you until you were gone. Please call us. We're sorry." The apology, though, I set the phone down, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Part of me felt vindicated my absence had finally forced them to recognize their dependence and mistreatment. Another part felt genuine concern for their well-being despite everything. And a small, wounded part feared this was just another manipulation tactic to pull me back into old patterns. "What are you thinking?" David asked after I'd been quiet for several minutes. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "I need to process this." The next morning, I called Dr. Fisher and scheduled an emergency session, forwarding her several key voicemails with permission to listen before our appointment. "This is a critical juncture," she said when we met later that day. "Their crisis doesn't automatically obligate you to respond, but if you choose to, we should discuss how to maintain your boundaries." We spent the session exploring my options and the complex emotions surrounding each potential response. The guilt was powerful, but so was my newfound sense of self-worth. "Remember that you can acknowledge their pain without taking responsibility for fixing it," Dr. Fisher advised. "Their financial problems existed before you left and would have eventually surfaced regardless. That evening, I spoke with Natalie after accepting the promotion offer. Without sharing specific details, I mentioned the family situation had developed further. "I hope you don't mind my sharing this," she said carefully, "but I went through something similar with my own mother years ago. The most important lesson I learned was that helping people who haven't acknowledged their behavior patterns only enables further harm." Her perspective from the other side of a similar journey proved invaluable. "Whatever you decide," she added, "don't sacrifice your hard-won peace." Over the next few days, I methodically analyzed my options. I wrote out potential responses, weighing the likely outcomes of each. I reviewed old journal entries documenting years of family dynamics, reminding myself why I'd needed to create distance in the first place. David supported without directing, offering his perspective when asked but never pressuring me toward any particular decision. "I just want you to be at peace with whatever choice you make," he said. "I'm with you either way." After much reflection, I decided to respond not from obligation or guilt, but from a place of strength and clear boundaries. I would acknowledge their situation without automatically assuming responsibility for fixing it. I would offer limited help contingent on significant changes in how we related to each other. Most importantly, I would maintain the distance necessary for my continued well-being while leaving room for potential healing if they were genuinely willing to work toward healthier relationships. As I drafted my response, I felt surprisingly calm. For the first time in my relationship with my family, I was choosing my terms rather than reacting to their demands. The decision marked a profound shift in how I valued myself in relation to others. After careful consideration, I sent an email rather than calling. Written communication allowed me to express myself clearly without being interrupted or emotionally manipulated during a difficult conversation. I outlined clear financial boundaries. I won't be providing direct financial assistance that enables unhealthy patterns. However, I'm willing to help connect you with financial counseling resources and debt management programs. The response came within minutes, my mother, expressing desperate relief that I'd finally replied. She agreed to mediation with minimal resistance, a sign of just how dire their situation had become. I researched mediators with experience in family estrangement and financial abuse, eventually selecting Dr. Raymond Carter, who specialized in complex family reconciliation. I scheduled our first session at his office for the following week, a neutral space where power dynamics could be managed professionally. Walking into that first session was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. My family looked simultaneously familiar and like strangers. My father appeared noticeably thinner, my mother's hair showing more gray than I remembered. Michael avoided eye contact entirely, while Stephanie's nervous fidgeting betrayed her discomfort. Dr. Carter established ground rules immediately: no interrupting, no personal attacks, and a commitment to honest communication. He asked each person to share their perspective on what had happened without commentary from others. My family's initial accounts were predictably self-serving. They portrayed themselves as loving, supportive parents and siblings blindsided by my unexpected abandonment during a family crisis. They minimized the credit card fraud as a misunderstanding and framed their harsh words at the hospital as stress-induced outbursts that shouldn't have been taken seriously. When my turn came, I calmly presented a documented timeline of events, including financial records of years of one-sided support, text messages containing manipulation and guilt-tripping, and the unauthorized credit card charges. I explained how their attempts to undermine my relationship with David and professional connections demonstrated a pattern of control rather than love. Dr. Carter skillfully prevented interruptions during my account, though I could see my family's expressions shifting between defensive anger and uncomfortable recognition as I spoke. "It seems we have significantly different perceptions of your family dynamics," Dr. Carter observed when I finished. "Jessica has provided concrete examples of behavior she experienced as harmful. I'd like to explore whether you can acknowledge any validity in her perspective." The breakthrough didn't come immediately. My parents initially deflected, arguing that all families have problems and suggesting I was too sensitive. Michael became defensive about his gambling, blaming external circumstances rather than personal choices. Stephanie vacillated between tearful apologies and resentful justifications. But as sessions continued weekly, small shifts began occurring. My father reluctantly acknowledged that the family had come to see my financial support as an entitlement rather than generosity. "I guess we did start expecting it," he admitted during our third session. When it stopped, we didn't know how to manage. My mother had a more difficult time accepting her role in the family dysfunction. Her identity as a good mother was so central to her self-image that recognizing her manipulative behaviors threatened her core beliefs about herself. But by our fifth session, she tearfully acknowledged something significant. "I was jealous," she confessed unexpectedly. "You were building a life that looked nothing like mine. I thought you were judging my choices by making different ones." These small acknowledgments didn't immediately repair our relationship, but they created tiny openings for potential healing. Dr. Carter helped us establish communication protocols that respected my boundaries while allowing limited contact. Michael's response remained the most variable. Sometimes he seemed genuinely remorseful about involving our parents in his gambling debts. Other times he reverted to blaming me for not being there when he needed help. His recovery would clearly be the longest journey, complicated by his need to address the gambling addiction he still partially denied. Stephanie proved surprisingly receptive to change. Of all my family members, she demonstrated the most authentic self-reflection. During a pivotal session, she admitted to sabotaging my relationship with David out of envy. "You seemed so happy with him, and I was miserable in my own relationship. I wanted to prove your life wasn't as perfect as it looked." The honesty of her admission created the beginning of a new, potentially healthier connection between us. Throughout this difficult process, I maintained my independence. I attended sessions but returned to my separate life afterward. I provided resource connections for financial counseling but did not offer direct monetary assistance. I expressed care for their well-being while refusing to resume my role as the family fixer. My relationship with David continued flourishing amid these complicated family dynamics. 6 months after I'd left my family, he proposed during a weekend hike to a mountain overlook. The moment was perfect in its simplicity and authenticity, much like the relationship we'd built. "You've shown me what real strength looks like," he said as he offered the ring. "I want to build a life with someone who knows her own worth." Planning our engagement party raised complex questions about family involvement. After careful consideration, I invited my parents and siblings with clear expectations about behavior. To my surprise, they respected these boundaries during the celebration, perhaps finally recognizing that access to my life was a privilege they needed to earn rather than a right they could demand. 9 months after cutting contact, I achieved my goal of purchasing my first home, a modest but charming 3-bedroom with a garden that received beautiful morning light. I bought it entirely on my own terms, without family financial entanglement or opinions influencing my choice. The housewarming party included carefully selected guests, close friends, supportive colleagues, and family members who had demonstrated respect for my boundaries. My mother attended, bringing a houseplant rather than criticism. My father came separately, his awkward but genuine congratulations suggesting continued work with his own therapist. Stephanie helped arrange the buffet, our conversations still cautious but increasingly authentic. Michael declined the invitation but sent a brief, civil text message, a small but significant improvement from past hostility. Looking back on the journey from family scapegoat to self-respect, I recognized how profoundly I had changed. The people-pleaser who had accepted blame for everyone else's problems had been replaced by a woman who understood her own worth and required reciprocity in relationships. Dr. Fisher helped me process the grief that accompanied even positive transformation. "You're mourning the family you thought you had," she explained during one of our now monthly sessions. "That's completely valid, even as you create healthier connections." I honored that grief while embracing my evolving understanding of family. I discovered that chosen family friends who loved authentically, colleagues who respected boundaries, a partner who valued my growth provided the genuine support I had always sought from blood relatives. My relationship with my immediate family continued, evolving with careful parameters. We weren't the close-knit unit I had once imagined, but neither were we completely estranged. We existed in a mindful middle ground, with contact governed by mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. I found unexpected ways to honor grandmother Helen's memory as I rebuilt my life. Her resilience after being widowed young had always inspired me. I established a small scholarship in her name at the local community college for single parents returning to education, creating a legacy of support that reflected her values without reenacting my own patterns of financial sacrifice. The most profound lesson emerged gradually. Forgiveness didn't require forgetting or resuming harmful patterns. I could forgive my family for their treatment while maintaining the boundaries necessary for my well-being. I could wish them healing without being responsible for providing it. I could love them from a distance that protected my hard-won peace. 2 years after that hospital waiting room confrontation, I sat in my garden watching the sunset, feeling a contentment that once seemed impossible. David worked in the kitchen, preparing dinner for friends coming over later. My career continued flourishing on my terms. My relationship with my family remained complicated, but no longer dominated my emotional landscape. The peace I had found came not from performing for others' approval, but from living authentically. The journey from scapegoat to self-respect had been painful but ultimately transformative. I had discovered that loving myself enough to establish boundaries was not selfish, but necessary not just for my well-being, but for the health of all my relationships. Have you ever had to create boundaries with people you love for your own well-being? What did that journey teach you? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own health and happiness. Thank you for listening to my journey. May it give you courage for your own.